The moment Ethan Mercer saw Clara Whitmore standing on her porch, holding a Winchester rifle against three armed men, he knew two things. She didn't need saving, and he'd been a damn fool for 6 years. The Montana wind carried her voice across the creek between their ranches, steady, cold, unafraid. The same voice that once whispered she loved him. The same woman the entire town mocked for her weight. The same heart he shattered when he rode away like a coward. Now he was back. And the woman everyone called too big to love had become something far more dangerous than he ever imagined. Untouchable. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this journey travels. The cowboy who returned to face what he destroyed. The Montana sky stretched endlessly gray the afternoon Ethan Mercer rode back into Pine Ridge after 6 years of running from everything that mattered. Dust clung to his worn leather coat. His horse moved slow, like it understood the weight pressing down on both of them. The town looked smaller than he remembered. Or maybe he'd just gotten used to bigger emptiness. Either way, coming home felt like swallowing broken glass. He hadn't planned on returning. Not now. Maybe not ever. But his father was dead, and apparently even bastards get buried proper. Ethan guided his horse down Main Street past the general store, the saloon, the church, with its crooked steeple that never got fixed. A few folks stopped to stare. Some nodded. Most just watched with that particular Montana silence that said more than words ever could. The prodigal son returns. Wonder how long before he runs again. He didn't blame them. He'd earned that reputation. The ranch sat 3 miles outside town, nestled against rolling hills that turned gold in summer and white in winter. His father had worked that land for 40 years, breaking his back and his spirit in equal measure. Now it belonged to Ethan, an inheritance he never wanted from a man he'd spent most of his life hating. The house looked worse than he expected. Peeling paint, sagging porch, weeds choking the front steps. His father had let everything go to hell in those final years, apparently too proud or too tired to ask for help. Ethan dismounted and stood there a long moment, staring at the front door like it might bite. Just go inside. Look around. Bury the old man tomorrow. Sell the place. Leave. Simple plan. Except nothing was ever simple in Pine Ridge. He was halfway to the porch when he noticed smoke rising from the neighboring property. The Whitmore Ranch, separated from his father's land by a narrow creek and about 1,000 regrets. His chest tightened. No, she couldn't still be here. But the smoke kept rising, steady and real, and Ethan felt something crack open inside him that he'd spent 6 years trying to keep buried. He told himself he wouldn't look. Told himself it didn't matter. Told himself he'd come back to bury his father, not resurrect ghosts. But by sunset he was standing at the creek, hidden behind a cluster of cottonwood trees, watching the Whitmore Ranch like some kind of lovesick fool. The house looked good, better than good. New roof, fresh paint, solid fences running clean lines across the property. Someone had been taking care of the place, working it, building something real. Then she stepped onto the porch. Clara Whitmore. The woman he'd loved since he was 17 years old, the woman he'd abandoned because he was too much of a coward to fight for her. Even from a distance, Ethan could see she'd changed. 6 years had carved away the softness he remembered, replaced it with something harder. She moved with purpose now, no hesitation, no apology in her stride. Her dark hair was pulled back practical. Her clothes were work-worn and practical. And she was still beautiful. Not the fragile kind of beautiful the town had always judged her against. Clara had never fit that mold. She was full-figured, solid, shaped like a woman who worked hard and ate real food and didn't waste time trying to shrink herself for anybody's comfort. The town had mocked her for it, called her fat, unwomanly, unmarriageable. Ethan had loved her anyway. Until you didn't, the voice in his head reminded him. Until you left her standing in the rain begging you to stay. He turned away from the creek before she could spot him. Some ghosts were better left alone. The next morning, Ethan buried his father in the family plot on the north end of the property. No service, no mourners, just Ethan, a shovel, and a pine box that felt too light for a man who'd cast such a long shadow. He didn't cry. Hadn't cried since his mother died when he was 12. His father had made sure of that, made sure Ethan understood that tears were weakness, that softness got you killed on the frontier, that love was a luxury men like them couldn't afford. You think that Whitmore girl's gonna save you? His father had snarled the night Ethan tried to propose to Clara. You think love matters when winter comes and the cattle die and you got nothing but empty promises to keep her warm? Ethan had been 19, stupid, desperate to prove his father wrong. I'll make it work, he'd insisted. I love her. His father had laughed, a bitter, ugly sound. Then you're a damn fool, and you'll destroy her just like I destroyed your mother. The words had landed like bullets, because Ethan's mother had been destroyed, worn down by poverty, isolation, and a husband who loved land more than people. She died giving birth to a stillborn daughter, and his father had never forgiven himself, never forgiven Ethan for surviving when his sister didn't. You want to marry that girl? His father had said quietly. Fine, but you'll do it without my land, without my name. You walk out that door with her, you get nothing. Ethan had stood there frozen, 19 years old and drowning in impossible choices. And he'd chosen wrong. He told Clara he needed time, told her they'd figure it out, told her everything except the truth, that he was terrified of becoming his father, terrified of dragging her down into the same hell that had killed his mother. 2 weeks later, he'd ridden out of Montana without saying goodbye, ran like a coward, stayed gone for 6 years. Now he was standing over his father's grave, and all those justifications felt like dust. You were wrong, Ethan said to the fresh-turned earth, about everything. The wind didn't answer. He found the letter that evening while sorting through his father's desk. It was tucked inside an old Bible that hadn't been opened in years, written in his father's cramped handwriting on yellowed paper. Ethan, if you're reading this, I'm dead. Good. Saves me from having to say this to your face. I lied to you, not about the land or the inheritance, that was all true, but about why I made you choose. I wasn't trying to punish you, I was trying to save you. Your mother loved me once. Really loved me. And I destroyed her. Dragged her out to this godforsaken frontier and worked her into the ground trying to prove I was man enough to build something that mattered. She died hating me. Died alone. Died because I was too proud and too stupid to see what I was doing to her. I saw that same future waiting for you and Clara. I saw you making my mistakes. I saw her dying the same way your mother did, slow, bitter, broken. So I forced you to leave. Thought if I drove you away, she'd have a chance at something better. Thought you'd both be safer apart. I was wrong. After you left, I watched Clara survive on her own. Watched her build that ranch into something strong. Watched her prove she was tougher than any man in this valley. And I realized I'd destroyed the best thing that ever happened to you. So I helped her, quiet-like. Paid off some debts. Ran off a few men who tried to take advantage. Made sure she had what she needed to keep going. Didn't make up for what I did. Nothing could. But maybe if you're reading this, maybe you can finish what I started. Maybe you can be the man I never was. Your father. Ethan read the letter 3 times. Then he walked outside, sat on the porch steps, and finally let himself feel the full weight of 6 wasted years. His father had been afraid. Afraid of history repeating. Afraid of Ethan making the same mistakes. Afraid of watching another woman die because of the Mercer name. But fear had made him cruel. And Ethan had inherited that cruelty without even realizing it. I left because I was afraid too, Ethan thought. Afraid I'd ruin her. Afraid I wasn't good enough. Afraid of everything except the truth, that walking away hurt her more than staying ever could. He stared across the darkening valley toward the Whitmore ranch. Lamplight glowed warm in the windows. Somewhere inside, Clara was probably finishing dinner. Maybe reading. Maybe just sitting quiet the way she used to, letting the day settle around her like dust. She'd survived without him. Built a life. Became someone stronger than the girl he remembered. And Ethan had no right to walk back into that life and ask for forgiveness. But he was going to anyway. 3 days passed before Ethan worked up the nerve to cross the creek. He spent those days repairing fences, clearing brush, trying to make his father's neglected ranch look like something worth keeping. The work felt good, honest, simple. The kind of labor that didn't require thinking. But every time he looked up, he saw Clara's ranch across the creek, saw her riding fence lines on a sturdy paint horse, saw her hauling water, saw her working alone, competent and fierce, like she didn't need anybody. She doesn't need you, the voice reminded him. She's better off without you. Probably true. But Ethan had spent 6 years running from hard truths. He was done running. He found her by the creek on the 4th morning, checking a section of fence that bordered both properties. She saw him coming from 50 yards away. Didn't move. Just stood there with one hand on a fence post, watching him approach like she was deciding whether he was worth her time. Ethan stopped 10 feet away, suddenly aware of how stupid this was. What are you going to say? Sorry? Sorry I abandoned you? Sorry I broke your heart and ran like a coward? Clara spoke first. Heard you were back. Her voice was exactly the same, low, steady, careful. The kind of voice that didn't waste words. Yeah, Ethan managed. Came back to bury my father. Heard that too. She tilted her head slightly. You planning on staying? Don't know yet. Honest answer. Clara's dark eyes studied him with an intensity that made him feel like she could see straight through to every cowardly thought he'd ever had. More honest than last time, anyway. The words landed like a slap. Clara! Don't. She held up one hand. Don't apologize. Don't explain. Don't insult me by pretending 6 years didn't happen. I wasn't. You left, Ethan. Her voice stayed calm, but something dangerous flickered beneath it. No letter, no warning, just gone. I spent 2 months thinking you were dead before someone told me you'd been seen in Wyoming. Ethan flinched. I thought I was protecting you. From what? From me. From my family. From turning into your mother? Claire's expression hardened. You think I'm that fragile? You think I need protecting from life? No, you left because you were afraid, Clara said flatly. Afraid of commitment. Afraid of being your father. Afraid I'd see through you and realize you weren't the man you pretended to be. Every word was true. Every word cut deep. You're right, Ethan said quietly. That seemed to catch her off guard. She blinked, some of the hardness slipping. What? You're right. I was afraid. Terrified, actually. And I convinced myself leaving was noble. Convinced myself I was doing you a favor. He met her eyes. I was wrong. I hurt you. And I'm sorry. Clara stared at him for a long moment. Then she shook her head. You know what the worst part was? She said softly. I would have gone with you. If you'd asked, I would have left everything and followed you anywhere. But you didn't even give me the choice. The pain in her voice nearly broke him. I know. You decided for both of us. I know. And now you're back, expecting what? Forgiveness? A second chance? No. Ethan swallowed hard. I'm not expecting anything. I needed you to know I never stopped. Don't. Clara's voice went sharp. Don't you dare finish that sentence. She turned away, gripping the fence post like she needed something solid to hold on to. Ethan stood there feeling like the ground had opened up beneath him. I should go, he said finally. Yeah, you should. He made it 3 steps before Clara spoke again. Your father helped me. Ethan stopped. What? After you left. Clara didn't turn around. He came by one day, didn't apologize, didn't explain, just asked if I needed anything. I told him to go to hell. Despite everything, Ethan almost smiled. He came back the next week, Clara continued, and the week after that. Eventually I stopped telling him to leave. He'd fix a fence, scare off men who thought a woman alone was easy prey, never said much, just showed up. Ethan's chest tightened. I didn't know. He made me promise not to tell you, said you'd come back eventually, and when you did, you needed to come back for the right reasons. Clara finally turned to face him. I hated him for what he did to you, but he spent his last years trying to make it right. He wrote me a letter, Ethan said, before he died. Confessed everything. Did it help? No. Ethan's throat felt raw. Just made everything worse. Clara studied him with an expression he couldn't read. Good, she said quietly. You deserve to feel worse. Then she walked past him toward her horse, leaving Ethan standing alone by the creek with nothing but regrets for company. Word spread fast in Pine Ridge that Ethan Mercer was back. Within a week, half the town knew he'd returned to claim his father's ranch. The other half didn't care. They were too busy gossiping about whether he'd try to rekindle things with Clara Whitmore. The women whispered about it at the general store. The men made quiet bets at the saloon. And Victor Hale, the wealthiest rancher in the valley, watched it all with cold calculation. Ethan first encountered Victor on a Saturday morning while picking up supplies in town. The man was hard to miss, tall, silver-haired, expensively dressed in a way that screamed money and power. He stood outside the general store talking to Sheriff Morrison, but his eyes tracked Ethan the moment he dismounted. "Mercer," Victor called out, all false warmth. "Heard you were back." Ethan tied off his horse. "News travels fast. Small town." Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Sorry about your father. He was a difficult man, but he knew how to work land." "He did. You planning on keeping the place?" "Haven't decided." "Smart." Victor nodded like Ethan had said something wise. "Ranch that size needs constant work. Easy to let it go to seed if you're not committed." He paused. "Of course, if you decide to sell, I'd be interested in making an offer." Ethan had heard about Victor Hale over the years, knew he'd been buying up land across the valley, consolidating power, pushing out smaller ranchers who couldn't compete with his resources. "I'll keep that in mind," Ethan said carefully. "Do that." Victor's gaze drifted toward the edge of town where Clara's ranch sat. "Shame about the Whitmore place, though. Woman like that struggling to keep it running alone. Can't be easy." Something dangerous stirred in Ethan's chest. "She seems to be managing fine." "For now." Victor's tone stayed pleasant, but something cold flickered beneath it. "But winter's coming. Things get harder when the snow falls. Woman alone out there." He shook his head. "Well, let's just say I've made her several generous offers over the years. For her own good, you understand." Ethan understood perfectly. Victor wanted Clara's land, and he was the kind of man who saw a woman alone as weakness waiting to be exploited. "Clara's tougher than you think," Ethan said quietly. Victor's smile sharpened. "Maybe. Or maybe she just hasn't met the right kind of pressure yet." Before Ethan could respond, the door to the general store opened and Clara herself stepped out carrying a crate of supplies. The entire street seemed to go quiet. Clara saw Ethan first. Her expression flickered. Surprise, annoyance, something else too quick to catch, before settling into careful neutrality. Then she noticed Victor. Her whole body went rigid. "Mrs. Whitmore," Victor said smoothly. "I was just telling young Mercer here what a fine job you've been doing with your ranch." "Were you?" Clara's voice could have frosted glass. "Indeed. In fact, I was hoping we might discuss my latest offer. I think you'll find it very reasonable." "I've told you before, Mr. Hale, my ranch isn't for sale." Of course, but circumstances change. Winter's approaching. You're still running that operation alone. Surely you've thought about how much easier life could be with—" "No." The word came out flat and final. Victor's smile strained. "Mrs. Whitmore, I'm only trying to—" "Help?" Clara shifted the crate to her hip. "Is that what you call it when you convince suppliers to overcharge me? When you spread rumors about my cattle being diseased? When your men accidentally cut my fences?" The street had gone absolutely silent now. Victor's expression hardened. "Careful, Clara. Accusations like that are true." Clara's eyes blazed. "And we both know it." For one tense moment, nobody moved. Then Ethan stepped forward and took the crate from Clara's arms. "Let me help you with that." Clara looked at him like he'd lost his mind. Victor's eyes narrowed. "Well, isn't this touching? The prodigal son playing hero." "Just helping a neighbor," Ethan said evenly. "Of course." Victor's gaze moved between them, calculating. "How neighborly." He tipped his hat to Clara, a gesture somehow both polite and mocking, and walked away, leaving tension thick in the air behind him. Clara immediately grabbed for the crate. "I know you don't need help," Ethan interrupted, "but I'm offering anyway. Your wagon's right there. Takes 30 seconds. Clara glared at him. Then, jaw tight, she turned and walked toward her wagon. Ethan followed, acutely aware of every eye on the street watching them. He loaded the crate into the wagon bed while Clara climbed into the driver's seat, her movements sharp with irritation. "Thanks," she said without looking at him. "Clara, stop." "Don't." She gathered the reins. "Don't make this into something it's not." "I wasn't trying to." "Victor Hale's been trying to buy my land for 3 years," Clara said flatly. "I've been handling him just fine without you. I don't need you riding to my rescue like some—" "I know that." "Then why did you step in?" Ethan met her eyes. "Because watching him talk to you like that made me want to punch him." Clara blinked. For a second, something almost like amusement flickered across her face. Then it was gone. "Well, don't." She snapped the reins. I fight my own battles. The wagon pulled away, leaving Ethan standing in the street feeling like he'd just survived a lightning strike. Over the next 2 weeks, Ethan threw himself into work. He repaired the barn roof, fixed broken fences, cleared years of accumulated debris. The ranch slowly started looking like something functional again, instead of a monument to his father's decline. But every day, without fail, he found himself watching Clara's ranch, watching her ride out before dawn to check her herd, watching her repair equipment in the yard, watching her work alone, capable and competent, proving she didn't need anybody. It drove him crazy. Not because she was struggling, she clearly wasn't, but because he could see the weight she carried, the constant pressure of running a ranch alone in a world designed to crush women who tried. He saw it in the way she worked past dark, saw it in how she never asked for help, saw it in the stubborn set of her shoulders that said she'd die before she'd let anyone, especially Victor Hale, think she was weak. And Ethan hated that he'd made it worse, hated that he'd abandoned her to face this alone, hated that every time he tried to help, she looked at him like he was just another man trying to prove she couldn't handle her life. Then the trouble started. It began small, a broken fence that let some of Clara's cattle wander. Then supplies ordered from town that mysteriously never arrived. Then a hay delivery that showed up 2 weeks late and half rotted. Each incident alone could have been coincidence. Together, they formed a pattern. Ethan recognized the pattern because he'd seen it before. Wealthy ranchers squeezing smaller operations, making life difficult until selling seemed like the only option. Victor Hale's fingerprints were all over it. One evening, Ethan was riding fence line near the creek when he heard raised voices from Clara's property. He kicked his horse into a trot and found Clara facing down 2 of Victor's ranch hands, rough-looking men who'd clearly been sent to intimidate. "Told Mr. Hale you'd be reasonable," one of them was saying, "but you just keep making things difficult." "Get off my land," Clara said coldly. "Now, Clara, we're just trying to have a conversation." "I said get off my land." The second man sneered. "What are you going to do? Report us to the sheriff? Morrison's in Hale's pocket, and you know it." Ethan dismounted and walked straight into the confrontation. Both men turned, hands moving toward their sidearms. "Problem here?" Ethan kept his voice level. Clara shot him a look that could have melted steel. "Nothing I can't handle." "Didn't say you couldn't handle it. Asked if there was a problem." The first ranch hand sized Ethan up. "This doesn't concern you, Mercer." "I'm making it my concern." "That's so?" The man's hand stayed near his gun. "Victor Hale ain't gonna like you sticking your nose in his business. Tell Victor I'm easy to find." For a tense moment, violence hung in the air. Then the first man spat in the dirt and jerked his head toward his horse. "You're making a mistake," he told Clara. "Mr. Hale's being generous now. That won't last forever." "I'll take my chances." The 2 men mounted up and rode off, leaving Ethan and Clara standing in uncomfortable silence. "I had that handled," Clara said finally. "I know." "Then why did you—" "Because they were 2 armed men on your property making threats, and I wasn't going to stand there and watch." Clara's jaw worked. "You can't keep doing this." "Doing what?" "Riding in to save me. I don't need—" "I know you don't need saving," Ethan said, frustration bleeding into his voice. "You've made that very clear, but that doesn't mean you have to face everything alone. And you think you get to help me now, after 6 years? No, I don't think I get anything. But I'm your neighbor, and Victor Hale's men were on your land threatening you, and I'm not going to apologize for giving a damn." Clara stared at him, something complicated working behind her eyes. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Why what? Why do you care? You left. You made your choice. Why come back now and pretend like—" "It's not pretend." The words came out rougher than Ethan intended. "I know I don't have the right. I know I destroyed whatever we had. But you're in trouble, Clara. And I'm not going to stand by and watch Victor Hale destroy you just because I'm too much of a coward to help." Silence stretched between them. Then Clara shook her head. "You're an idiot, Ethan Mercer." "I know. And a coward." "I know that too. And you hurt me worse than anyone ever has." Ethan's chest tightened. "I know." Clara looked away, jaw tight like she was fighting some internal battle. "My north fence needs mending," she said finally. 2 sections got cut last night, probably Hale's men." Ethan blinked, not sure he'd heard right. "You want—" You want me to help fix it? I want you to stop standing there looking pathetic and make yourself useful if you're so damn determined to help. It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't rejection either. Okay, Ethan said carefully. When? Tomorrow, dawn. And Ethan? Clara's eyes met his. Don't make me regret this. Then she walked away, leaving Ethan standing there feeling like he'd just been given something fragile and terrifying that he absolutely could not afford to break. They worked in silence the next morning, mending fence line while the sun climbed over the mountains. Clara handed him tools without speaking. Ethan followed her lead without asking questions. The work was hard, physical, the kind of labor that required focus and left little room for conversation, which was fine, because Ethan had no idea what to say anyway. Around midday, Clara finally broke the silence. Your father came out here once, she said, not looking up from the post she was tamping into place. About 2 years ago. Said he wanted to teach me how to repair a windmill pump. Ethan glanced at her. Did you let him? No. Told him I'd already figured it out myself. She paused. He laughed. Said I reminded him of your mother. My mother? Said she was stubborn as hell too. Said it was the thing he loved most about her and the thing that scared him the most. Ethan's throat tightened. Clara hammered the post one more time, then straightened. He told me he was sorry, she said quietly, for forcing you to choose, for making me collateral damage in whatever war he was fighting with himself. What did you say? I told him sorry doesn't fix anything. Clara's eyes met his, but I appreciated him saying it anyway. They went back to work. By sunset, the fence was repaired and Ethan's hands were blistered raw. Clara offered him water from her canteen. He drank, handed it back, tried not to notice how close they were standing. Thank you, Clara said, for helping. Any time. Don't make promises you can't keep. I'm not. Clara studied him for a long moment, like she was trying to decide if he was worth believing. I need to move my cattle to winter pasture before the first snow, she said finally. It's a 2-person job minimum. My regular hand broke his leg last month and I haven't found a replacement. Ethan's heart kicked up. I could help. Why would you do that? Because you need help. And because, he hesitated, because I want to prove I'm not the man who left. Clara's expression softened just slightly. One job, she said. That's all I'm offering. Don't read anything into it. I won't. And Ethan? Her voice went serious. If you run again, if you disappear or change your mind or decide this is too hard, I will never forgive you. Understand? I understand. Clara held his gaze a moment longer. Then she nodded and walked toward her horse, leaving Ethan standing in the fading light, terrified and hopeful in equal measure. Because he'd been given a second chance he absolutely did not deserve, and he would rather die than waste it. The cattle drive started before dawn on a Tuesday that smelled like frost and pine. Ethan saddled his horse in the dark, his breath misting in the cold mountain air. Across the creek, lamplight glowed in Clara's windows. He could picture her moving through the house, boots on, coat buttoned, coffee strong enough to strip paint. She'd always been an early riser, even back when they were kids and the world seemed simpler, back when he hadn't ruined everything yet. He rode over just as the sun broke the horizon, painting the valley in shades of gold and amber. Clara was already mounted, checking her saddle rigging with the kind of methodical focus that left no room for mistakes. You're late, she said without looking at him. Ethan glanced at the sky. Sun's barely up. Should have been here before it rose. Next time I'll arrive yesterday. The corner of Clara's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close enough to give Ethan a dangerous flicker of hope. They rode out together toward the summer pasture where Clara's herd had been grazing since spring. The work was straightforward in theory. Move 60 head of cattle 5 miles north to winter grazing land before the first real snow hit. In practice, it meant long hours in the saddle, constant vigilance, and the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that made you question your life choices. Ethan had missed it like hell. The cattle were scattered across a wide meadow, grazing lazy in the morning light. Clara rode the perimeter while Ethan started pushing the stragglers toward the main group. The animals moved slow, reluctant, the way cattle always did when you wanted them to hurry. Keep them tight on the left, Clara called. There's a ravine about a 1/4 mile north. Last thing we need is some idiot steer deciding to explore. Ethan guided his horse left, cutting off a young bull that looked like it had ideas. They worked without much talking after that. Didn't need to. Clara pointed, Ethan moved. She whistled, he adjusted. It was the kind of wordless coordination that came from understanding. Not just the work, but each other. Or at least the echo of what they used to understand. By noon, they'd gotten the herd moving in the right direction. Clara rode point while Ethan kept the rear animals from wandering. The sun climbed higher, burning off the morning chill. Sweat dampened Ethan's shirt beneath his coat. Around midday, Clara called a break near a creek bend where the water ran clear and cold. They dismounted, let the horses drink, ate cold biscuits and jerky in silence. Ethan watched Clara from the corner of his eye. She'd pulled off her hat and her dark hair caught the sunlight. Her face was flushed from work, her hands scarred and capable. She looked tired, strong, real in a way that made his chest ache. "Stop staring," Clara said without looking at him. "Wasn't staring." "Yes, you were." She bit into a biscuit. "And it's making me uncomfortable." "Sorry." "Don't apologize, just stop." Ethan looked away, jaw tight. They finished eating in silence. Then Clara stood, dusted off her pants, and swung back into the saddle, like the conversation had never happened. The afternoon brought trouble. They were pushing through a narrow valley when one of the cows suddenly bolted, spooked by something Ethan couldn't see. The rest of the herd shifted nervous, lowing and stamping. "Easy," Clara called, her voice calm and firm. "Keep them steady." But the damage was done. 3 more cattle broke from the group, crashing through brush toward the tree line. "Damn it!" Clara wheeled her horse. "I'll get them. You hold the main group." She took off before Ethan could argue, disappearing into the pines. Ethan focused on keeping the remaining cattle calm, riding slow circles and speaking low. The herd settled after a few tense minutes, going back to their plodding march north. Claire returned 20 minutes later, driving the 3 runaways ahead of her, her expression dark as a thundercloud. "What spooked them?" Ethan asked. "Cougar tracks. Fresh." Ethan's hand moved instinctively toward the rifle strapped to his saddle. "Big cat's probably long gone," Clara said, "but keep your eyes open anyway." They pushed on as the sun started its descent toward the mountains. The temperature dropped fast once the light began fading. Ethan could feel winter lurking just beyond the horizon, waiting to swallow the valley whole. They reached the winter pasture just before dark, a wide basin protected on 3 sides by rocky hills. Good grass, fresh water from a spring-fed pond, enough shelter to keep the herd alive through the worst of the season. Clara opened the gate, and they drove the cattle through, counting heads as they passed. 58. "We're short too," Ethan said. Clara swore under her breath. Probably wandered off when that first one bolted. "Want me to go back and look?" "No." She closed the gate and locked it. "Too dark. We'll search at first light." They made camp on the edge of the pasture, building a small fire and setting up bedrolls. Clara had brought beans and hardtack. They ate sitting on opposite sides of the fire, not talking, just listening to the night sounds, wind in the pines, cattle settling, the distant cry of an owl. "Thank you," Clara said finally, "for helping today." "Don't thank me yet. We're still too short. We'll find them tomorrow." She poked at the fire with a stick. "You did good work today. Didn't complain, didn't ask stupid questions, just worked." "Is that a compliment?" "Don't push it." Ethan smiled despite himself. Clara stood and walked to her bedroll, spreading it out near a cluster of rocks that blocked the wind. "Get some sleep," she said. "We ride at dawn." Ethan lay awake long after Clara's breathing went slow and steady. The fire burned down to coals, stars wheeled overhead, cold and distant. Somewhere in the darkness, a coyote howled. He thought about the last time they'd camped together under open sky. He'd been 18, Clara 17. They'd snuck away from town on some half-baked adventure that seemed important at the time. They'd kissed for the first time that night, fumbling and nervous and perfect. Ethan had promised her the world. Then he'd taken it all back and disappeared. "You don't get to have those memories anymore," he told himself. "You gave up that right when you left." But the memories didn't care about rights. They just kept coming. They found the missing cattle the next morning, one dead from what looked like a cougar attack, the other standing guard over the carcass like it didn't understand why its companion wouldn't get up. Clara stared at the dead animal, her jaw working. That's $300 gone, she said quietly. Ethan didn't know what to say. $300 was a fortune for a small rancher. Enough to buy winter feed or repair equipment or pay workers. Losing it to a predator was just another way the frontier ground you down. I'm sorry, he said. Clara shook her head. Not your fault, just bad luck. But Ethan could see the weight of it in her shoulders. They buried what was left of the carcass to keep scavengers from the area, then drove the surviving cow back to the winter pasture. The ride home was quiet. Clara didn't speak except to give directions. When they reached her ranch, Ethan helped her unsaddle the horses. I appreciate the help, Clara said, her back to him as she hung her saddle in the barn. But you don't need to keep coming around. I can manage from here. What if I want to keep coming around? Why would you want that? Because I like working with you. Because it feels right. Because... Don't. Clara turned to face him. Don't make this into something it's not. We moved some cattle. That's it. Don't confuse work for forgiveness. I'm not. Yes, you are. Her eyes were hard. You think if you help enough, if you work hard enough, I'll just forget what you did. But it doesn't work that way, Ethan. I know that. Do you? Because every time you look at me, I see it, that hope. Like maybe if you just try hard enough, we can go back to being those stupid kids who thought love was enough. The words landed like punches. We can't go back, Ethan said quietly. I know that, but maybe we could... Could what? Start over? Pretend the last 6 years didn't happen? Clara shook her head. I'm not that girl anymore. And you're not the boy I loved. We're strangers now. And strangers don't get second chances just because they used to know each other. She walked out of the barn before Ethan could respond. He stood there in the dim light, surrounded by the smell of hay and leather and old wood, feeling like he'd just lost something he never really had. The next week brought the first real cold snap. Temperatures dropped below freezing overnight. Frost covered everything by morning. Ethan spent his days winterizing his father's ranch, insulating the barn, stocking firewood, making sure the well pump wouldn't freeze. He didn't see Clara. Told himself it was better that way. Told himself she was right. They were strangers now, and he had no business hoping for more. But he still found himself watching her ranch across the creek. Still noticed when her lamplight burned late into the night. Still worried when he saw storm clouds gathering over the mountains. Then Victor Hale made his move. Ethan first heard about it in town. He'd ridden in for supplies and found the general store buzzing with gossip. Heard Hale's buying the old Morrison property. That puts him right up against Clara Whitmore's northern border. Can't be legal, can it? That's grazing land she's been using for years. Ethan's blood went cold. He found the store owner, a weathered man named Tucker, who'd known his father. What's this about Hale buying land near Clara's ranch? Ethan asked. Tucker lowered his voice. Happened yesterday. Old man Morrison died last month. His son needed money fast, so he sold to Hale. Problem is, Clara's been grazing cattle on that land for 3 years under a handshake agreement with Morrison. Now Hale owns it, and he's saying the agreement died with the old man. Can he do that? Nothing in writing, so... Tucker shrugged. Legally, it's his land. He can do what he wants. Which is what? Rumor is he's putting up fences next week, cutting her off completely. Ethan swore under his breath. There's more, Tucker said reluctantly. Hale's been talking to the bank. Apparently Clara took out a loan last spring to buy new breeding stock. Hale's suggesting the bank might want to reconsider the terms. He can do that? He owns 40% of the bank, so yeah, he can do pretty much whatever he wants. Ethan left the store with his supplies and a growing sense of dread. He rode straight to Clara's ranch and found her in the barn, repairing a broken harness. We need to talk, he said. Clara didn't look up. About what? Victor Hale bought the Morrison property. Her hand stilled on the leather. When? Yesterday. And you're just telling me now? I just found out. Clara set down the harness and stood. What else? Ethan told her everything Tucker had said. The fences, the bank, Hale's systematic effort to squeeze her operation until she had no choice but to sell. Clara listened without interrupting. When he finished, she walked to the barn door and stared out at the mountains. I knew this was coming, she said quietly. Hale's been circling for 3 years. I just thought I had more time. There's got to be something we can do. We? Clara turned to look at him. There is no we, Ethan. This is my problem. The hell it is? Hale's trying to destroy you. And that's my business, not yours. Clara, no. Her voice went hard. You don't get to ride in and save me. You don't get to play hero after 6 years of being gone. I'm not trying to play hero. I'm trying to help. Why? Because you feel guilty? Because you think helping me will make up for what you did? Clara's eyes blazed. I don't need your guilt, Ethan. I don't need your pity. And I sure as hell don't need you thinking I'm some damsel who can't fight her own battles. That's not what I think. Then what do you think? I think you're the strongest person I know, Ethan said. I think you've built something incredible here against impossible odds. And I think Victor Hale is a bastard who's trying to destroy you because he can't stand seeing a woman succeed where men have failed. Clara's expression flickered. Surprise, anger, something softer. And I think, Ethan continued, that you don't have to face this alone. Not because you can't, but because you shouldn't have to. Silence stretched between them. Even if I wanted your help, Clara said finally, what could you do? Hale owns half the valley. He's got money, power, the sheriff in his pocket. What do you have? A ranch next to yours, which means anything he does to you affects me too. Clara studied him for a long moment. This isn't about us, she said. If you help me, it's business, nothing more. Fine. I mean it, Ethan. Don't read into this. Don't think it changes anything between us. I won't. Clara held his gaze a moment longer, like she was trying to decide if he was lying. Then she nodded. All right, business partners. She held out her hand. Ethan shook it, trying to ignore the jolt that went through him at her touch. So what do we do? He asked. Clara's eyes hardened. We fight back. They spent the next 3 days planning. Clara had documentation of her agreement with Old Man Morrison, not a legal contract, but letters proving he'd allowed her to use the grazing land. It wasn't much, but it was something. Ethan rode into town and talked to everyone who'd known Morrison, built a case that the old man's word had been solid, that Clara had relied on that agreement in good faith, that breaking it now was dishonorable, even if it was technically legal. Honor meant something in Montana, not as much as money or power, but something. Meanwhile, Clara met with the bank. She couldn't stop Hale from pressuring them, but she could make sure they knew she'd never missed a payment and had no plans to start. The banker, a nervous man named Perkins, didn't promise anything, but he didn't threaten her either. Small victories. On the 4th day, Ethan was riding fence line when he saw riders approaching Clara's ranch. 4 men. Armed, moving with purpose. Ethan kicked his horse into a gallop. He reached Clara's property just as the men dismounted. Clara was already on her porch, rifle in hand. You're trespassing, she called out. The lead rider, one of Hale's foremen, a mean-looking bastard named Colt, smiled without warmth. Just delivering a message, Mrs. Whitmore. Mr. Hale wanted you to know the fences go up tomorrow. He's being generous, giving you 24 hours to move any cattle off his property. That land's been open range for 20 years. Was open range. Now it's Hale land. Colt's smile widened. Of course, Mr. Hale's still willing to make you a fair offer for your property. Save you all this trouble. Get off my land. Now, Clara, there's no need to be hostile. Ethan rode up and dismounted in one smooth motion, his hand resting on his sidearm. The lady asked you to leave. Colt's eyes narrowed. This doesn't concern you, Mercer. She's my neighbor. That makes it my concern. You want to die for a woman who ain't even yours? Try me and find out. The tension ratcheted up to breaking point. Colt's men shifted in their saddles, hands moving toward weapons. Then Clara's voice cut through the air, cold and sharp. Everybody calm down. She stepped off the porch, rifle still in hand but pointed at the ground. Colt, you delivered your message. Now leave before this gets ugly. Colt stared at her for a long moment. Then he spat in the dirt and mounted his horse. 24 hours, he said. Then those fences go up. And anyone on the wrong side of them is trespassing on Hale property. That clear enough for you? He didn't wait for an answer. Just wheeled his horse and rode off, his men following. Ethan watched them disappear down the road, his heart still hammering. You didn't need to do that, Clara said. Yes, I did. I had it handled. 4 armed men against 1 woman? That's not handled. That's a powder keg waiting to explode. Clara's jaw tightened. I've been dealing with men like that for 3 years. And you shouldn't have to. Why do you care so much? The question came out frustrated, almost angry. Why does this matter to you? Because you matter to me, Ethan said before he could stop himself. Clara went still. Don't, she said quietly. Don't what? Don't say things like that. Don't make this complicated. It's already complicated. No, it's business, that's all. You really believe that? Clara met his eyes, and for just a second, her mask slipped. He saw the fear beneath the strength, the exhaustion beneath the determination, the part of her that was tired of fighting alone, even if she'd never admit it. Then the mask came back. Go home, Ethan. Clara, please. Her voice cracked on the word. Just go home. Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to stay, wanted to pull her close and promise everything would be all right, but he'd broken enough promises already. So he mounted his horse and rode away, leaving Clara standing alone in the fading light. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He lay in his father's old bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the confrontation over and over. Clara was in trouble, real trouble. The kind money and lawyers couldn't fix because Hale had both on his side. But there had to be something Ethan could do, some angle they were missing. He got up and lit a lamp, then started going through his father's papers again. There had to be something useful. Property records, old contracts, anything that might give them leverage. He found it 3 hours later, buried in a stack of surveyor's maps. An old easement agreement between his father's ranch and the Morrison property, giving right-of-way for water access across Morrison land. The easement was over 30 years old, filed with the county, legally binding, and it ran straight through the section Hale wanted to fence off. Ethan stared at the document, his mind racing. If the easement was still valid, and there was no reason it shouldn't be, then Hale couldn't legally fence off that land without maintaining access to the water source, which meant Clara could argue she had a right to use the route her cattle had been taking for years. It wasn't a perfect solution. Hale could still make trouble, but it gave them leverage, something to negotiate with. Ethan waited until dawn, then rode to Clara's ranch with the document. She answered his knock, already dressed for the day, her hair still damp like she'd just washed it. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "I found something." He held up the easement agreement. "In my father's records. It's old, but it might help." Clara took the document and read it, her eyes moving fast. "This is..." She looked up at him. "This is access to the spring-fed creek, which runs through Morrison's old property, now Hale's. If the easement's still valid, he can't block access without violating it, which means your cattle can still use that route to reach water." Clara read the document again, more carefully this time. "This doesn't give me grazing rights," she said, just access to water. "But it means Hale can't completely cut you off. And it gives us something to bring to the county clerk. If we can prove the easement's been in continuous use, we might be able to challenge Hale's right to fence it off completely." Clara's eyes brightened. "At least force him to leave gates or allow passage." "Exactly." She looked at him, something complicated working behind her expression. "Why are you doing this?" "I told you." "No, really. Why?" Clara's voice went soft. "You could sell your ranch tomorrow and leave. Start fresh somewhere else. Why stay and fight a battle that's not even yours?" Ethan thought about lying, about saying it was just being neighborly, or good business, or simple human decency. But he was done lying. "Because 6 years ago I ran away from the best thing that ever happened to me," he said quietly. "And I've regretted it every single day since. And I know I can't fix what I broke, I know that. But maybe I can help you keep what you've built. Maybe that counts for something." Clara's eyes glistened. "You can't just show up and make everything okay with grand gestures, Ethan. I know. You hurt me, really hurt me. I know. And I don't know if I can trust you again. I don't even know if I want to try." "I know that too." Clara looked down at the document in her hands. "But this could actually help. So let me help. As your neighbor, as your business partner, as whatever you need me to be." Silence stretched between them. Then Clara nodded. "All right, we take this to the county clerk tomorrow. See if the easement holds up. And if it does, then we make Victor Hale understand he picked the wrong woman to push around." For the first time in days, Clara smiled. Not at him exactly, but but close enough to make Ethan's chest ache with hope he had no right to feel. They rode into town together the next morning and spent 4 hours at the county clerk's office, digging through old records and property maps. The easement held up. Not only held up, it turned out there were 3 other similar easements crossing Morrison's old property, all filed decades ago, all technically still valid. "Hale's going to have a fit," the clerk said, an elderly woman named Martha who clearly enjoyed the drama. "He probably didn't even know these existed." "Can he invalidate them?" Clara asked. "He can try, but these were legally filed and never formally revoked. Unless he can prove they haven't been used in years, which he can't because you've been using them, they're binding." Clara and Ethan exchanged looks. "So what happens now?" Ethan asked. Martha smiled. "Now you file a formal objection to any fencing that would block easement access. Force Hale to either leave gates or find another way to secure his property. And if he doesn't comply," she shrugged, "county can fine him, even force him to remove the fences." It wasn't total victory, but it was enough to give them breathing room. They filed the paperwork and left the clerk's office feeling something dangerously close to optimistic. "We should celebrate," Ethan said. "Celebrate what? We haven't won anything yet." "We haven't lost either. That counts for something." Clara shook her head, but she was smiling. "One drink, then I have work to do." They went to the saloon, a decision that raised eyebrows throughout Pine Ridge. Ethan Mercer and Clara Whitmore sitting together in public, sharing a table like they had some kind of understanding. The gossip would spread fast. Ethan didn't care. Clara ordered whiskey. Ethan got the same. They sat in the corner booth and didn't talk much, just sat in comfortable silence while the afternoon light slanted through the dusty windows. "This doesn't change things," Clara said eventually. "Between us." "I know." "I'm still angry at you." "You should be." "And I don't forgive you." "I don't expect you to." Clara took a drink, her eyes never leaving his face. "But maybe—" She hesitated. "Maybe we could try being friends again. Eventually." Ethan's heart kicked up. "I'd like that. Just friends, nothing more." "Whatever you want, Clara." She held his gaze a moment longer, then looked away. But her hand stayed on the table, inches from his, and Ethan thought maybe, just maybe, friendship was a place to start. Victor Hale's response came 3 days later in the form of a lawsuit. The papers arrived by courier on a gray morning that smelled like snow. Clara read them standing in her doorway, her face going pale as she scanned the legal language. Ethan was fixing her barn door when he heard her swear loud enough to scatter the chickens. "What is it?" he called. Clara didn't answer, just walked over and shoved the papers at him. Ethan read them twice, his anger building with every word. Hale was suing Clara for damages, claiming her cattle had destroyed his property, that she'd trespassed repeatedly, that she owed him compensation for lost grazing land and emotional distress. The amount he was asking for was absurd, $20,000, more than Clara's entire ranch was worth. "This is garbage," Ethan said. "Pure intimidation." "Doesn't matter. I still have to respond, which means hiring a lawyer I can't afford to fight a case I can't win." Clara's voice shook. "He's going to bleed me dry in legal fees even if the suit gets thrown out." "We'll fight it." "With what money, Ethan? You think I've got thousands of dollars sitting around for lawyers?" "Then we'll find another way." "There is no other way." Clara grabbed the papers back. "This is what Hale does. He crushes people with money and power until they give up. And I'm about to become another name on his list of victories." She walked away before Ethan could respond, disappearing into her house and slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Ethan stood there feeling helpless and furious in equal measure. He'd seen this before, wealthy men using the law as a weapon against people who couldn't afford to defend themselves. It was legal. It was effective. And it was completely soulless. But there had to be a way to fight back. He spent that evening going through his father's papers again, looking for anything that might help. Old contracts, property surveys, letters. Anything. He found something, but not what he expected. A letter from his father to Victor Hale, dated 4 years earlier. The language was formal, careful, but the message was clear. His father had caught Hale's men tampering with surveyor markers on the disputed border between their properties. His father had proof, and he'd warned Hale that if it happened again, he'd take the evidence to the county. The letter ended with a simple line, I suggest we both respect established boundaries and avoid future unpleasantness. Ethan read it 3 times, his mind working. His father had dirt on Hale, evidence of illegal activity. And if that evidence still existed somewhere in these records, it might be enough to make Hale back off. He searched for 2 more hours before finding it, a small leather journal tucked behind a loose board in the desk. Inside were dated entries, sketches of surveyor markers, notes about Hale's men moving boundary stones to claim extra land. It wasn't much, but it was something. The next morning, Ethan rode to Clara's ranch before dawn. She answered his knock looking exhausted, like she hadn't slept. "I found something," he said without preamble. He showed her the journal and explained what it contained. Clara read through it carefully, her expression unreadable. "This is from 4 years ago," she said finally, "and it's about your father's property, not mine. But it proves a pattern of behavior. Hale manipulating boundaries, using illegal tactics to expand his holdings. If we bring this to the county, it proves your father caught him once, 4 years ago. That's not enough to stop a lawsuit. It's leverage. Maybe. Or maybe Hale just destroys us both for threatening him." Clara handed the journal back. "I appreciate what you're trying to do, Ethan, but this isn't enough." "So what, you're just giving up?" "I'm being realistic." Her voice cracked. "I've got 2 weeks to respond to that lawsuit. I can't afford a lawyer. I can't fight Hale in court. And I sure as hell can't keep my ranch if I'm buried in legal debt. There's got to be another option." "Like what? Praying for a miracle?" Clara laughed bitterly. "I'm out of options, Ethan. I'm out of time. And I'm out of fight." She turned away, but not before Ethan saw tears in her eyes. "I'm going to lose everything," she whispered, "just like Hale planned." Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to promise her it would be okay, wanted to fix this the way he'd failed to fix everything else. But Clara was right. They were out of options, unless they changed the game entirely. "What if we merge the ranches?" Ethan said. Clara turned slowly. "What?" "Combined operations, pool our resources. If we're business partners officially, equal partners, then anything Hale does to you affects me too. And anything I have becomes yours." "That's insane." "Is it? Think about it. Together we control more land than either of us do separately. We have more leverage, more bargaining power, and if Hale wants to come after you, he has to come after both of us." Clara stared at him like he'd grown a second head. "You're talking about merging our properties, our entire operations." "Yes. That's not a small decision, Ethan. That's marriage-level commitment without the marriage." "I know. And you do that? Risk everything you have on a partnership with someone who doesn't even trust you?" Ethan met her eyes. "Yes." "Why?" "Because it's the right move strategically, because together we're stronger, and because—" He hesitated. "Because I'm not walking away this time. Whatever happens, I'm staying." Clara's eyes searched his face, looking for lies or doubt or hidden motives. "This doesn't fix us," she said quietly. "This doesn't make us okay." "I know. And if we do this, it's business, pure business, no complications. Whatever you need it to be." Clara turned away, her arms wrapped around herself. "I need to think about it." "Take all the time you need." "I don't have time. The lawsuit deadline is in 2 weeks." "Then think fast." Ethan moved toward the door. "But Clara, for what it's worth, I think we'd make a hell of a team." He left before she could respond. Winter came hard and fast that year. The first real snow hit 5 days later, dumping 8 inches overnight and turning the valley into a white wasteland. The temperature dropped below 0. Cattle huddled together for warmth. Horses grew shaggy winter coats. And every morning brought the brutal work of breaking ice on water troughs and hauling feed through knee-deep drifts. Clara still hadn't given Ethan an answer about the merger, but she also hadn't told him to leave, which he took as a good sign. They fell into a routine without discussing it. Ethan would ride over before dawn and help with the hardest chores, hauling water, repairing storm damage, checking on livestock. Clara would make coffee so strong it could strip rust. They'd work in companionable silence until the sun climbed high enough to burn off the worst of the cold. Then Ethan would go back to his own ranch and do it all over again. It was exhausting, brutal, the kind of work that broke men who weren't strong enough. But Ethan had never felt more alive. One morning he arrived to find Clara standing outside her barn, staring at something in the distance. "What's wrong, Shaum?" he asked. She pointed toward the northern ridge where her cattle should have been grazing in the winter pasture. Ethan couldn't see anything at first. Then he noticed movement, dark shapes against white snow, moving wrong. "Someone's moving my herd," Clara said, her voice tight with controlled fury. They saddled horses and rode out fast, pushing through deep snow toward the winter pasture. They found 6 of Hale's men driving Clara's cattle toward the property line, using the storm as cover to steal her livestock right out from under her. Clara pulled her rifle and fired a warning shot into the air. The men stopped, turning to face them. The same foreman from before, Colt, sat his horse at the front of the group, smirking. "Morning, Mrs. Whitmore. Just doing some neighborly fence repair. Your cattle wandered onto Mr. Hale's property, so we're relocating them. Those cattle are on my winter pasture, which is still my land. Actually, according to the new survey Mr. Hale commissioned, this section falls on his side of the boundary." "That's a lie." Colt shrugged. "Take it up with the county if you don't believe me. Meanwhile, these cattle are trespassing." Ethan rode forward until he was between Colt and the herd. "Turn those cattle around and ride off this property before this gets ugly." "Or what, Mercer? You gonna shoot 6 armed men over some cows that ain't even yours?" "They're my partner's cattle, which makes them my business." That made Colt pause. "Partner?" "That's right. As of yesterday, Clara and I merged operations, which means anything you do to her, you do to me. And I'm a lot harder to push around than one woman alone." It was a bluff. The merger wasn't official yet because Clara hadn't agreed, but Colt didn't know that. "Hale's not going to like this," Colt said slowly. "Tell Hale he can come discuss it with me personally. Until then, get off our land." For a long, tense moment, nobody moved. Then Colt spat in the snow and jerked his head toward his men. "Let's go. This ain't worth the trouble." They rode off, leaving Clara's cattle milling confused in the snow. Clara waited until they were out of earshot before turning to Ethan. "Our land?" she said. "Our partnership? I was making a point. By lying about a merger that doesn't exist? Does it matter? It worked. It matters because now Hale's going to think we're officially partners, which means when he comes after me, he'll come after you too." "Good. Let him." Clara stared at him. "You're insane." "Probably. But I meant what I said. If we're doing this, if we're fighting Hale, we do it together or not at all. I haven't agreed to the merger." "Then agree. Because this isn't going away, Clara. Hale's escalating, and you can't fight him alone anymore." The wind howled across the ridge, bitter and sharp. Clara's cheeks were red from cold, her breath misting in the frozen air. "Equal partners?" she said finally. 50-50 split on everything?" "Equal partners. And it's strictly business. No strings, no expectations. Whatever you need." Clara looked at him for a long moment, her dark eyes searching. "All right," she said. "We merge. But Ethan, if you screw me over, if you run again, if you make me regret this, I won't. You better not, because I don't give third chances." They shook hands there in the snow, sealing a partnership that felt dangerous and necessary and completely insane. And Ethan knew he'd just committed himself to something that went far beyond business, whether Clara wanted to admit it or not. They spent the next week making it official, drew up papers with the help of a lawyer from the next county over, a sharp woman named Patricia Chen who didn't like Victor Hale and seemed delighted to help them fight back. The merger was complex. 2 properties, 2 herds, shared equipment and resources. They had to inventory everything, assign values, make sure the split was genuinely equal. Patricia worked fast, asking pointed questions and cutting through their attempts to be polite about sensitive topics. "Who makes final decisions if you disagree?" she asked. Ethan and Clara looked at each other. "We talk it through," Clara said. "And if you can't reach agreement, then we keep talking until we do." Patricia raised an eyebrow. "That's not a legal answer." "It's the only answer we've got," Ethan said. "We're partners. We figure it out together." Patricia made notes. "Your funeral. What about dissolution? If the partnership doesn't work out?" "It'll work out," Clara said firmly. "But if it doesn't, then we split assets proportional to what each person brought in, adjust for improvements, and go our separate ways." Clara's voice stayed steady, but Ethan could hear the tension beneath it. "But that's not going to happen." Patricia looked between them with an expression that suggested she'd seen this story before and knew how it ended. But she drew up the papers anyway. They signed them on a Thursday afternoon in Patricia's cramped office, their signatures making it real. "Congratulations," Patricia said. "You're now legally bound to either succeed together or fail together. Try not to kill each other." "Inspiring," Clara muttered. They filed the merger papers with the county that same day, making sure word would reach Victor Hale fast. It did. The response came 2 days later when Ethan found Clara in her barn, staring at a letter with an expression caught between rage and fear. "What now?" Ethan asked. "Hale's dropping the lawsuit. That should have been good news." But Clara's tone said otherwise. "What's the catch?" Ethan asked. "He's buying the banknote on my property, calling in the full loan amount due in 30 days. Ethan's stomach dropped. "Can he do that?" "If he owns the note, he can set the terms. And I don't have $15,000 sitting around to pay off a loan I thought I had 2 more years to repay." "How much do you owe?" $14,800, due in full by January 15th or the bank forecloses." Ethan did the math fast. That gave them 5 weeks. "We'll find a way." "How? We can't make $14,000 in 5 weeks. Not in winter, not with cattle prices down, and then we find another lender. Refinance with a different bank. Every bank in 3 counties either works with Hale or is scared of him. Nobody's going to refinance a loan he once called in." Clara crumpled the letter. "He's got me. After everything, the easements, the merger, all of it. He's still got me." Ethan took the letter and read it himself, looking for loopholes. There weren't any. Hale had played this perfectly. Waited until Clara committed to the merger so Ethan's resources were tied up in the partnership. Then struck where she was most vulnerable. Unless they could come up with $14,000 in 5 weeks, Clara would lose her ranch. And since they'd just merged, Ethan would lose half of everything too. "We need to talk to Patricia," Ethan said. "See if there's any legal way to—" "There isn't. I already asked. Hale's within his rights. Then we sell something, cattle, equipment, whatever it takes. In winter, nobody's buying, and even if they were, we'd get maybe half what anything's worth." Ethan's mind raced, searching for solutions that didn't exist. "What about your late husband's family?" he asked. "Could they—" "No." Clara's voice went hard. "I'd rather lose the ranch than ask them for anything." There was a story there, but Ethan didn't push. "Then we find another way," he said. "We've got 5 weeks. That's time." "Time to do what?" "I don't know yet. But I'm not letting Hale win, not after everything we fought for." Clara looked at him with exhaustion in her eyes. "Maybe we should just accept it, Ethan. Maybe this is one battle we can't win." "The hell it is." Ethan grabbed her shoulders. "Listen to me. We didn't merge our ranches and put everything on the line just to give up the first time things got hard. We're fighters, Clara. Both of us. And we're going to find a way through this." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I've already lost you once by giving up too easy. I'm not making that mistake again." The words hung in the air between them. Clara's eyes glistened. "This isn't about us, isn't it? You think I'd fight this hard for any business partner?" "Don't." Her voice cracked. "Don't make this about feelings. That's not fair." "Maybe not, but it's true." Clara pulled away, wrapping her arms around herself. "Even if we had feelings," she said quietly, "that doesn't change math. We need $14,000, and feelings don't pay debts." She was right. But Ethan wasn't ready to give up. The answer came 3 days later from an unexpected source. Ethan was in town picking up supplies when he overheard 2 ranchers talking at the general store. Heard the army's buying horses again. Paying premium prices too, what with the expansion out west. Fort Benson's supposed to need 100 head before spring. Ethan's mind started working. He and Clara had horses. Not 100 head, but enough to make a dent if they sold them at army prices. He finished his shopping fast and rode straight to Clara's ranch. He found her mucking out stalls, her face red from exertion. "I've got an idea," he said without preamble. He explained what he'd heard. The army was buying horses. Good prices. If they could deliver a large enough herd to Fort Benson before January, they might be able to raise enough money to at least renegotiate the loan terms. Clara leaned on her shovel, thinking. "We've got maybe 40 horses between both ranches," she said. "That's not nearly enough." "What if we bought more?" Bought them cheap from surrounding ranchers and resold them to the army at a premium. With what money? We use the cattle as collateral. Take out a short-term loan. Another loan? Are you insane? It's calculated risk. We buy horses cheap, sell them high to the army, pay off the short-term loan, and put the rest toward your banknote. Clara shook her head. Too many things could go wrong. Horses could get sick. Army could change their mind. We could get stuck with livestock we can't sell and double the debt. Or it could work. And if it doesn't, then we're no worse off than we already are. Clara stabbed the shovel into the hay. I hate this. I hate all of it. I know. But I don't have a better idea. So we try? She looked at him for a long moment. We try, she said finally. But Ethan, this is our last chance. If this fails, it won't fail. You can't promise that. No, but I can promise I'll fight like hell to make it work. Clara's expression softened just slightly. All right, let's go lose our minds buying horses in the middle of winter. They spent the next 2 weeks on the trail, riding to every ranch within 50 miles and buying every horse they could find. The work was brutal. Long days in the saddle, nights camping in freezing temperatures, negotiating with ranchers who knew they were desperate and charged accordingly. But slowly, they built a herd. 20 horses became 40. 40 became 60. By the end of the second week, they had 83 head, a ragtag collection of ranch horses, retired work horses, and a few half-wild Mustangs that would need serious training before the army would touch them. They drove the herd back to Clara's ranch and spent 4 days working the horses hard, getting them used to saddles and riders and taking commands. Ethan had always been good with horses, but Clara was better. She had a way of reading them, understanding what they needed, earning their trust through patience rather than force. He watched her work a particularly stubborn mare, her voice low and steady, her movements calm and deliberate. The horse fought at first, then gradually settled, responding to Clara's quiet confidence. "You're thinking too loud," Clara said without looking at him. "What?" "I can hear you thinking from over here. It's distracting the horses." Ethan smiled despite himself. "Sorry. Make yourself useful and work that gelding. He's got potential, but he spooks easy." They worked until dark, then collapsed in Clara's kitchen, too tired to do more than eat cold beans and bread. 3 more days, Clara said, studying a map of the route to Fort Benson. "If we push hard, weather's supposed to hold." "Supposed to?" She traced the route with one finger. 60 miles through mountain passes in January. What could possibly go wrong? "Are you always this optimistic?" "Only when I'm about to lose everything I've worked for." Ethan reached across the table and covered her hand with his. Clara froze. "We're going to make this work," Ethan said quietly. "You don't know that." "Yes, I do. Because we're not those scared kids anymore, Clara. We're fighters, and we don't quit." Clara looked at their hands, his rough and scarred, hers smaller but just as weathered by work. "When did you get so stubborn?" she asked. "Learned from the best." She almost smiled. Then she pulled her hand away and stood up. "Get some sleep. We ride at dawn." But as Ethan lay in the spare room that night, staring at the ceiling and listening to the wind howl outside, he thought maybe, just maybe, the walls between them were starting to crack. They left for Fort Benson 2 days before Christmas. The sky was gray, threatening snow but holding off for now. They moved the herd slowly, keeping the horses calm and together, taking breaks every few hours to let them graze and rest. The first day went smooth. They made good time, covering nearly 20 miles before making camp in a sheltered valley. The second day brought trouble. They were crossing a high ridge when the lead horses suddenly spooked, rearing and trying to bolt. The rest of the herd panicked, scattering in 3 directions at once. "What the hell?" Clara started. Then Ethan saw it. Fresh cougar tracks in the snow. And not far away, the big cat itself, crouched on a rock outcropping, watching them with predatory patience. "Don't move," Ethan said quietly. The cougar's tail twitched. Ethan reached slowly for his rifle, but before he could draw it, one of the younger horses screamed and bolted directly toward the cat. The cougar sprang. Everything happened fast. The horse veered at the last second. The cougar landed in deep snow, and Clara charged forward on her mount, yelling and firing her rifle into the air. The cougar fled, disappearing into the rocks. But the damage was done. The herd was scattered across a 1/4 mile of mountainside, panicked and dangerous. It took them 4 hours to round up the horses. By the time they'd gathered the last stragglers, the sun was setting and they'd lost half a day's progress. They made camp exhausted and frustrated. "We'll never make Fort Benson by the deadline at this rate," Clara said, staring into the fire. "Yes, we will." "Ethan, we push harder tomorrow. Make up the lost time." "The horses can't." "They can. We just need to keep them calm and moving." Clara shook her head but didn't argue. That night the temperature dropped below zero. They huddled close to the fire, wrapped in every blanket they had, trying to stay warm enough to sleep. Somewhere around midnight, Ethan woke to find Clara shivering violently. "You all right?" he asked. "But fine, just cold." She was more than cold. Her lips were blue, her whole body shaking. Without thinking, Ethan moved closer and wrapped his arms around her. Clara went rigid. "What are you doing?" "Keeping you from freezing to death. Don't read into it." "Ethan, just shut up and let me help." For a moment, Clara stayed tense, like she was fighting between pride and survival. Then she relaxed into him, letting his body heat warm her. They stayed like that for hours, not speaking, just sharing warmth in the frozen darkness. And when Clara finally fell asleep, her head resting against Ethan's shoulder, he lay awake thinking about second chances and the woman he'd never stopped loving. Morning came cold and clear. Clara pulled away the moment she woke, not meeting Ethan's eyes. "We don't talk about last night," she said. "Nothing to talk about." "I mean it. That was survival. Nothing more." "I know." But they both knew it was more than that. They pushed the herd hard that day, making up lost time. The horses were tired but cooperative. The weather held. By sunset, they'd covered 30 miles and were more than halfway to Fort Benson. One more day. That's all they needed. They made it to the fort 2 days before the deadline with 81 horses. 2 had gone lame on the trail, and they'd had to leave them behind. The Army quartermaster inspected the herd with a critical eye, checking teeth and hooves and temperament. "Most of these are decent," he said finally. "Few are pretty rough. I can give you $60 a head for the good ones, $40 for the rest." Ethan did the math fast. Even at those prices, they'd clear almost $5,000. Not enough to pay off the full loan, but enough to renegotiate, enough to buy time. "We'll take it," Clara said. The quartermaster nodded and went to draw up the paperwork. They got paid in banknotes that afternoon and rode back toward Pine Ridge with $5,300 and a cautious hope that maybe, just maybe, they'd pulled off a miracle. 2 days later, they walked into the bank and presented the money to the nervous banker, Perkins. "We're here to pay down the loan," Clara said. Perkins looked at the money like it might bite him. "Mrs. Whitmore, I'm afraid the terms were quite specific. The full amount due, we're aware, and we're here to renegotiate." Clara's voice stayed calm but carried steel underneath. "We've brought over a third of what's owed, and we have a solid plan to pay the rest within 6 months, unless you'd rather foreclose and deal with the legal mess that follows." Perkins swallowed hard. "Mr. Hale was very clear." "Mr. Hale doesn't run this bank. You do." Ethan leaned forward. "So what's it going to be? Take our money and work with us? Or explain to the county why you foreclosed on a loan that was being actively repaid?" Perkins looked between them, clearly torn between Hale's influence and the reality sitting in front of him. Finally he nodded. "I'll draw up new terms, but Mr. Hale isn't going to like this." "Then he shouldn't have underestimated us," Clara said. They left the bank feeling like they'd won a battle, even if the war was far from over. And when Ethan offered to buy Clara dinner to celebrate, she surprised him by saying yes. They ate at the only restaurant in Pine Ridge worth visiting, a small place run by a widow named Martha who served decent steak and didn't ask questions. Clara ordered whiskey with her meal. Ethan did the same. They sat across from each other in a corner booth while the rest of the town pretended not to stare. "They're all watching us," Clara said quietly. "Let them watch." "Easy for you to say. You're not the one they've been gossiping about for 6 years. Ethan took a drink. "What do they say?" "That I'm a widow who can't keep a ranch running, that I should have sold to Hale years ago, that I'm too stubborn for my own good." She paused. "And now they're saying I'm desperate enough to partner with the man who abandoned me." "Are you? Desperate, I mean." Clara met his eyes. 3 weeks ago I would have said yes. Now, she shrugged. Now I don't know what I am. Their food arrived. They ate in silence for a while. the weight of everything unsaid sitting heavy between them. Finally, Clara set down her fork. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. All right. Why did you really come back? And don't give me that line about burying your father. There's more to it. Ethan considered lying, considered giving her the safe answer that wouldn't complicate things further. But he was done lying. I came back because I was tired of running, he said, because every town I drifted through felt empty. Because no matter how far I went, I couldn't outrun the fact that I'd walked away from the only thing that ever mattered to me. Clara's hand tightened on her glass. Don't. You asked for honesty. I asked why you came back, not for a confession. Maybe they're the same thing. They're not. Clara's voice rose slightly. Coming back to bury your father is one thing. Coming back because you suddenly decided you made a mistake 6 years ago is not sudden. I knew it was a mistake the day I left. Then why didn't you come back sooner? Because I was a coward. Because I convinced myself you were better off without me. Because every year that passed made it harder to admit how wrong I'd been. Clara looked away, blinking hard. You don't get to do this, she said. You don't get to show up after 6 years and act like we can just pick up where we left off. I'm not trying to pick up anything. I'm just telling you the truth. The truth is 6 years too late. Maybe, but it's still the truth. Clara stood abruptly. I need air. She walked out before Ethan could respond. He sat there for a moment, wondering if he'd just destroyed the fragile partnership they'd built. Then he threw money on the table and followed her outside. He found her standing in the street, her arms wrapped around herself against the cold. Clara, oh, you know what the worst part is, she interrupted. I actually started to believe we could do this. Be partners, keep it professional, not let the past mess everything up. She turned to face him. But you can't help yourself, can you? You have to make it complicated. It was always complicated. It didn't have to be. We had a good thing going. We were working well together. We saved the ranch. Why couldn't that be enough? Because I'm in love with you, Ethan said. The words hung in this frozen air between them. Clara's eyes went wide. You can't just say things like that. Why not? It's true. Because it's not fair, because I spent 6 years trying to get over you, 6 years convincing myself I was better off alone. And just when I finally started believing it, you show up and, her voice cracked, and you make me hope again. And I hate you for that. I know. No, you don't. You don't know what it was like. Watching you right away, waiting for months thinking maybe you'd come back, finally accepting you weren't going to, building a life without you. Tears streamed down her face now. I was fine, Ethan. I was actually fine. And now you're here and I'm not fine anymore and I don't know what to do with that. Ethan stepped closer. Tell me to leave. Tell me you don't feel anything and I'll walk away right now. That's not fair. Tell me anyway. Clara stared at him, her chest heaving. I can't, she whispered. Why not? Because it would be a lie. The admission seemed to break something in her. She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. Ethan closed the distance between them and pulled her into his arms. For a second, Clara resisted. Then she collapsed against him, crying into his coat while he held her tight. I'm so tired, she said. Tired of fighting. Tired of being strong. Tired of pretending I don't still love you. Ethan's heart stopped. You love me? I hate that I love you, but yes. Clara, Don't make promises. Don't tell me it'll be okay. Just, she pulled back enough to look at him. Just don't leave again. That's all I ask. If you're going to be in my life, be in it, all the way. No running when things get hard. I promise. You promised before. I was a kid before. I'm not anymore. Clara searched his face, looking for doubt or lies or weakness. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her because she nodded. Okay, she said quietly. Okay. Ethan cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs wiping away her tears. Can I kiss you? That's a terrible idea. I know. It'll complicate everything. Probably. And if this goes wrong, it won't. Clara closed her eyes. You can't promise that either. Then I'll promise this instead. I'm not going anywhere. Whatever happens, wherever this goes, I'm staying. Clara opened her eyes and looked at him for a long moment. Then she kissed him. It wasn't gentle or tentative. It was desperate and fierce and full of 6 years of missing each other. Ethan kissed her back like she was air and he'd been drowning, his hands tangling in her hair. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Clara laughed shakily. "We're idiots." "Yeah, this is going to be a disaster." "Probably. But I don't care anymore." "Good. Neither do I." They stood there in the middle of Main Street, holding each other while the whole town watched through windows and whispered behind hands. Let them talk, Ethan thought. Let them gossip and judge and think whatever they wanted. He'd spent 6 years caring what other people thought. He was done with that. News of their reconciliation spread through Pine Ridge faster than wildfire. By the next morning, everyone knew that Ethan Mercer and Clara Whitmore were together again. The gossip ranged from supportive to vicious, with plenty of people taking bets on how long it would last. Victor Hale heard about it by noon. His response came that evening in the form of an uninvited visit. Ethan was at Clara's ranch helping repair a section of fence when 3 riders approached. Hale sat on a gray stallion that probably cost more than most ranchers made in a year. His expression was cold and calculating. "Mercer, Mrs. Whitmore." Hale tipped his hat with mock courtesy. "Heard congratulations are in order." "What do you want, Hale?" Clara's voice was flat. "Just being neighborly. Wanted to see how you two are settling into your new partnership." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Must be nice, combining resources like that. Makes things easier when you're fighting above your weight class." "If that's all you came to say..." "Actually, I came to make you an offer. One last time, before things get truly unpleasant." Hale leaned forward in his saddle. "I'll buy both your properties. Fair market value. Cash payment. You can walk away clean, start fresh somewhere else." "Not interested," Ethan said. "You should be, because I own the note on Mrs. Whitmore's property now. And while I appreciate your recent payment, the fact remains you still owe me $9,000, which I can call due whenever I choose. We have a renegotiated payment schedule, which I can revoke. The terms state I have the right to demand full payment if I believe the borrower is at risk of default." Hale's smile widened. "And I have concerns about your financial stability." Clara's hand moved toward the rifle leaning against the fence post. "Don't give him the satisfaction," Ethan said quietly. "Listen to your partner, Clara. He's got a better head on his shoulders than you do." Hale straightened. "You have 48 hours to consider my offer. After that, I call in the loan and you lose everything. Your choice." He rode off without waiting for a response. Clara stood there trembling with barely controlled rage. "He can't do this," she said. "We had an agreement with the bank," which Hale now controls, and apparently the terms give him discretion to call it in. "So what? We just lose after everything we fought for?" Ethan's mind raced. There had to be a way out, some angle they hadn't considered. Then it hit him. "Your late husband," he said. "You mentioned his family once, said you'd rather lose the ranch than ask them for help." Clara's expression hardened. "No." "Clara, I said no. You don't know what you're asking. I'm asking you to set aside pride and accept help if it means keeping your ranch." "It's not about pride." Clara's voice went quiet. "My husband's family never accepted me. They thought I was beneath him. Too common. Too..." She gestured at herself. "Too everything. When he died, they tried to take the ranch. Said a woman like me had no business owning land. I fought them in court for 2 years before they finally gave up. I didn't know. Why would you? You weren't here." The words came out sharp, then Clara's face softened. "Sorry, that wasn't fair." It was accurate. Clara turned away. "The point is, his family hates me, and even if they didn't, they'd never give me money. They'd rather see me lose everything than help me keep what my husband left me." "What about other family, your parents?" "Dead. No siblings. No cousins worth mentioning." Clara laughed bitterly. "I'm alone, Ethan. Always have been. It's why losing the ranch feels like losing everything. It's all I have. You have me. For how long? Until the next time things get hard?" The words stung, but Ethan couldn't blame her for the doubt. "I know I haven't earned your trust yet," he said, "but I'm not going anywhere, and we're going to figure this out." "How? We don't have $9,000. We can't get it in 48 hours, and Hale's got us cornered." Ethan thought hard, running through options and discarding them just as fast. Then he remembered something his father had mentioned in one of his journal entries. A banker in Helena who'd helped him years ago when things got tight. An honest man who didn't bow to pressure from wealthy ranchers. I might know someone who can help, Ethan said. Clara looked at him skeptically. Who? A banker in Helena. A guy named Thomas Reed. My father did business with him years ago. If anyone would be willing to refinance a loan Hale controls, it'd be him. Helena's 2 days' ride. We don't have time. Then I'll ride fast. Ethan, it's our best shot, Clara. Maybe our only shot. Clara chewed her lip, clearly torn. What if he says no? She asked. Then we're no worse off than we are now. And what am I supposed to do while you're gone? Just wait and hope Hale doesn't make another move? You hold the fort. Keep the ranch running. Don't let Hale intimidate you. Easy to say. You've been doing it for 3 years. You can do it 2 more days. Clara stared at him for a long moment. If you're not back in 3 days, I'm coming after you. Deal. Ethan started to turn toward his horse, but Clara grabbed his arm. Be careful. Hale's not going to like you going around him. He might try to stop you. Let him try. Clara pulled him down and kissed him hard. Come back, she said against his mouth. I will. Promise me. I promise. Ethan rode out that night, pushing his horse hard through the darkness. He made it to Helena in 36 hours, stopping only to rest the horse and grab a few hours of sleep. By the time he reached the city, he was exhausted, sore, and running on pure determination. He found Thomas Reed's bank on Main Street, a solid brick building that radiated old money respectability. Reed himself was in his 60s, gray-haired and sharp-eyed. He listened to Ethan's story without interrupting, his expression giving nothing away. When Ethan finished, Reed leaned back in his chair. Victor Hale's a snake, he said bluntly. Always has been, but he's a powerful snake with friends in high places. Does that mean you won't help? Didn't say that. Just stating facts. Reed pulled out a ledger. Your father was a good man. Difficult, but honest. He helped me once when I needed it. I owe him. So you'll refinance the loan? I'll consider it, but I need to see the property first. Make sure it's worth the risk. I can bring you documentation. I prefer to see things with my own eyes, and I need to meet your partner. Make sure she's got the spine to see this through. Ethan's heart sank. That means another 2 days' travel. We don't have that kind of time. Then we'll have to move fast. Reed stood. I can leave tomorrow morning. We ride to Pine Ridge together, I assess the property, and if I like what I see, I'll wire the funds to pay off Hale's note before the deadline. Just like that? Just like that, assuming the property's worth it. It is. I guarantee it. Reed smiled slightly. Your father said the same thing once. He was right. Let's hope you are too. They rode out at dawn the next day. Reed proved to be tougher than he looked. He kept pace with Ethan's grueling schedule without complaint, and by the second evening they'd made it back to Pine Ridge. Ethan went straight to Clara's ranch and found her in the barn, working by lamplight. She looked up as he entered, her face lighting up with relief. You came back. Told you I would? Ethan gestured toward Reed, who was dismounting outside. And I brought help. He introduced them quickly. Reed shook Clara's hand and immediately started asking pointed questions about the ranch, acreage, water rights, cattle numbers, equipment value. Clara answered every question with the kind of detailed knowledge that came from years of hard work and careful management. Reed listened, nodded, asked follow-up questions. Finally, he said, Show me the property. They spent the next 2 hours touring the ranch by lamplight and moonlight. Reed inspected fences, checked water sources, examined the cattle, and asked more questions. Clara answered everything with patience and precision, her competence obvious in every word. When they finished, Reed turned to Ethan and Clara with an unreadable expression. I'll do it, he said. Clara's knees nearly buckled with relief. You'll refinance the loan? I'll wire $9,000 to Pine Ridge Bank tomorrow morning with instructions to pay off Victor Hale's note in full. Then we'll draw up new loan terms, reasonable terms, that give you time to build up the operation and pay me back properly. Why? Clara asked. Why take this risk for people you barely know? Reed smiled. Because Ethan's father once told me that the frontier needs people who fight for what they believe in. And because watching Victor Hale lose something he wants is worth the risk all by itself. They finalized the details that night. Reed would wire the money at dawn. Clara and Ethan would meet him at the bank to ensure everything went through properly. And Victor Hale would find out he'd lost right at the moment he thought he'd won. The next morning, they gathered at the bank just as it opened. Perkins looked nervous when he saw Reed, but he processed the wire transfer without argument. $9,000 transferred from Reed's bank to Clara's account, then immediately applied to pay off Hale's note. "The loan is satisfied," Perkins said, his voice shaking slightly. "Mrs. Whitmore, you now owe First Bank of Helena instead of Mr. Hale." "And the new terms?" Clara asked. Perkins handed her the paperwork. 7% interest, 5 years to repay, no early payment penalties. It was a good deal. Better than good. Clara signed without hesitation. Victor Hale walked into the bank just as they finished. His face went dark when he saw them. "What's going on here?" "Good morning, Victor," Reed said pleasantly. "Just conducting some business?" Hale's eyes narrowed. "What kind of business?" "The kind where Mrs. Whitmore pays off your loan in full. She no longer owes you a cent." For a moment, Hale just stared. Then his expression turned dangerous. "You interfering bastard!" "Careful, Victor. We're in a public establishment." Reed smiled. "And I believe you've been outmaneuvered." Hale turned to Clara, his voice low and furious. "You think this changes anything? You think one small victory means you've won?" "No," Clara said calmly. "But it means I'm still standing, and that's enough for now. This isn't over." "I expect it's not, but I'm not afraid of you anymore." Hale looked between them, Clara standing tall, Ethan at her side, Reed watching with cool amusement. Then he turned and walked out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Silence filled the bank. Then Clara started laughing. It was slightly hysterical, born of relief and exhaustion, and the sheer absurdity of everything they'd been through. Ethan started laughing too, and soon they were both leaning on each other, laughing until tears ran down their faces. Reed watched them with something like approval. "You two are either very brave or very foolish," he said. "Probably both," Ethan managed. "Ethan's. Good. The frontier needs more of both." Reed tipped his hat. "I'll be heading back to Helena. You know where to find me when you need anything." He left them standing in the bank, still laughing, still alive, still fighting. That evening, Clara insisted on cooking dinner to celebrate. Ethan showed up to find the table set with her good dishes and something that smelled incredible on the stove. "What's all this?" he asked. "Victory dinner. We earned it." They ate stew and fresh bread and drank whiskey that burned warm all the way down. Outside, snow started falling again, soft and steady, covering the valley in white. "Can I ask you something?" Clara said after they'd eaten. "Anything. When you left 6 years ago, where did you go?" Ethan took a drink, buying time to figure out how to answer. "Everywhere? Nowhere. Colorado for a while. Wyoming. Worked ranches, drove cattle, did whatever kept me moving." He stared into his glass. "Spent a lot of time drunk, spent a lot of time angry. Spent even more time trying to convince myself I'd made the right choice." "Did you ever succeed? Convincing yourself, I mean?" "No. The harder I tried, the more I knew I'd screwed up." He looked at her. "There were other women. I won't lie about that. But none of them were you, and eventually I stopped trying." Clara absorbed that. "Why tell me?" "Because you deserve the truth, all of it. Even the parts that hurt. Especially those." Clara reached across the table and took his hand. "I was with someone else, too," she said quietly. "Obviously. I got married." "I know. Did that hurt? Hearing I'd married someone else?" "Yes, but I had no right to be hurt. I'd given up that right when I left. He was a good man, kind, patient. He knew I didn't love him the way I loved you, and he married me anyway." "What happened to him?" "Logging accident. A tree fell wrong. He died instantly." Clara's voice stayed steady, but Ethan could hear the grief underneath. "I cried at his funeral. Not because I'd lost the love of my life, but because he deserved better than a wife who was still in love with someone else." "Clara, I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty. I'm telling you because you were honest with me, and because if we're going to do this, really do this, we can't have secrets." Ethan squeezed her hand. "No secrets. And no running." no running. And if things get hard, we fight through it together. Clara smiled, fragile and real. Okay then, we're really doing this. We're really doing this. They sat there holding hands across the table while the snow fell outside and the fire burned low in the hearth. And for the first time in 6 years, Ethan felt like he'd finally come home. Spring came to Montana like a cautious promise, melting snow revealing brown grass that would turn green again if you were patient enough to wait. Ethan and Clara worked the combined ranch through those early months with the kind of focused intensity that came from knowing they'd almost lost everything. They fixed fences together, moved cattle to fresh pasture, repaired equipment that had been held together by hope and wire for too long. The town watched them with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. Some folks placed bets on how long the partnership would last. Others whispered that Clara had lowered herself by taking back a man who'd abandoned her once already. Clara ignored them all. She'd spent too many years caring what people thought about her weight, her choices, her refusal to conform to what a woman was supposed to be. She was done shrinking herself to make others comfortable. One morning in late April, Ethan found her standing in the pasture staring at something in the distance. "What's wrong?" he asked. Clara pointed toward the northern ridge where Victor Hale's property began. "He's building something. Been at it for 2 weeks now." Ethan squinted against the morning sun. Sure enough, he could see construction, framework going up, men working with lumber and tools. "Any idea what it is?" "No, but knowing Hale, it's nothing good." They found out 3 days later when one of Hale's men rode up to deliver an invitation. "Mr. Hale requests the pleasure of your company at the grand opening of his new cattle auction house," the man said, handing Clara an embossed card. "This Saturday. He said to tell you he's modernizing the valley whether you like it or not." Clara read the invitation with mounting anger. "An auction house, right on our border." "What's wrong with an auction house?" Ethan asked after the man left. "Everything. It means Hale controls where cattle get sold, who gets to bid, what prices are offered. He'll use it to squeeze out small ranchers who can't afford his fees." Clara crumpled the invitation. "And there's nothing we can do about it. It's his land. He can build whatever he wants. We don't have to attend. Actually, we do. If we don't show up, it looks like we're afraid of him. And I'm done being afraid." So that Saturday, they dressed in their best clothes and rode to Hale's new auction house together. The building was impressive, 2 stories tall with a large arena and seating for hundreds. Hale had spared no expense, clearly intending to make a statement about his power and influence. The place was packed with ranchers from across the territory. Hale stood at the center like a king holding court, shaking hands and accepting congratulations. When he saw Clara and Ethan, his smile turned predatory. "Mrs. Whitmore. Mercer. So glad you could make it." He gestured around. "What do you think of my little project?" "It's certainly ambitious," Clara said neutrally. "Ambitious is building a ranch from nothing. This is just good business." Hale's eyes glittered. "The frontier's changing. The old ways, small operations barely scraping by, those days are over. The future belongs to men with vision and capital." "And women?" Clara asked. "Does the future have room for us? Or are we just supposed to step aside?" "I've never discriminated, Clara. If you can compete, you're welcome to try." He paused. "Of course, competing requires resources most people don't have." "We'll manage." "Will you?" "Because from where I stand, you're one bad season away from losing everything. Again." Ethan stepped forward. "She's not alone anymore." "No, she's got you. The boy who ran away once and will probably run again when things get tough." Hale's smile widened. "That must be comforting." Clara grabbed Ethan's arm before he could do something stupid. "We appreciate the invitation, Mr. Hale, but we should be going." They turned to leave, but Hale's voice followed them. "You know what your problem is, Clara. You fight too hard for things that don't matter. You'd be happier if you just accepted your limitations." Clara stopped walking. Ethan felt her whole body go tense. "My limitations?" she said quietly. "We all have them. Some of us are just more honest about it." Clara turned slowly. The whole room had gone quiet, everyone watching the confrontation unfold. "You want to talk about limitations, Victor? Let's talk about yours." Her voice carried across the arena. "You've got money, you've got power, you've built this fancy auction house to prove how important you are. But you know what you don't have?" "What's that?" "Respect. Real respect. The kind you can't buy. Clara walked back toward him. People bow to you because they're afraid. They smile at your jokes because you control their livelihoods. But nobody actually likes you. Nobody trusts you. And when you finally fall, and you will fall, nobody's going to help you back up. Hale's face darkened. Careful, Clara. I'm done being careful. I'm done letting men like you make me feel small. I've spent 3 years surviving everything you threw at me. I'm still standing, still fighting, and I'm not going anywhere. Neither am I. Good. Then we understand each other. Clara smiled without warmth. May the best rancher win. She walked out with Ethan at her side, leaving Hale standing in his fancy auction house, surrounded by people who suddenly wouldn't meet his eyes. Outside, Ethan let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever seen. Probably both. Clara's hands were shaking. But I meant every word. I know you did. That's what scared me. They mounted their horses and rode back toward home in silence. Finally, Clara spoke. Do you think he's right? About me fighting too hard for things that don't matter? No. I think you fight hard for things that matter more than he'll ever understand. Like what? Like proving that strength doesn't come from money or power. Like showing that being different doesn't mean being less. Like building something real that can't be bought or sold or taken away by men who think they own the world. Clara looked at him, her eyes wet. When did you get so smart? I've been paying attention to the right teacher. They rode on through the spring afternoon, and Ethan thought about how much had changed since he'd come home. How Clara had gone from barely tolerating him to trusting him. How they'd built something together that was stronger than either of them alone. And how terrified he was of losing it. Summer arrived hot and dry, bringing challenges neither of them expected. The drought started slow. Less rain than usual, grass growing sparse in the pastures. Then it accelerated. Streams dried up. Waterholes turned to mud. The heat pressed down like a physical weight. Cattle started losing weight. Feed prices climbed. Ranchers across the valley began selling off herds they couldn't afford to maintain. Ethan and Clara held on by sheer stubbornness and careful management. They rotated pastures to preserve grass, hauled water from the creek, sold off the weakest cattle before prices dropped further. But it was a losing battle. One evening in late July, Clara sat at her kitchen table surrounded by ledgers and bills, her face drawn with exhaustion. We're not going to make it through winter, she said flatly. Ethan looked over her shoulder at the numbers. They were bad. Worse than bad. What if we took out another loan? From who? Reed's already extended us as much credit as he can, and no one else will touch us. Then we sell more cattle. At what price? The market's collapsed. We'd lose money on every head. Ethan pulled up a chair and sat down. There's got to be something we're not seeing. There isn't. I've been over these numbers 100 times. Between the drought and the loan payments, we're hemorrhaging money. Unless something changes. A knock interrupted her. Ethan opened the door to find one of Hale's men standing on the porch. Got a message from Mr. Hale, the man said, handing over an envelope. Ethan read it twice, his anger building. It was an offer to buy them out. A generous offer, actually, enough to pay off their debts and leave them with a little money to start over somewhere else. The message was clear. Hale had won, and he was offering them a graceful exit. Clara read it over Ethan's shoulder. No, she said immediately. Clara, I said no. I'm not selling to him. I don't care what he's offering. We might not have a choice. There's always a choice, and I choose to keep fighting. Fighting with what? We're running out of options. Clara stood abruptly. So what? You want to give up? Take his money and run? I want us to survive. And if that means swallowing our pride, this isn't about pride. It's about not letting him win. Not after everything we've been through. And what happens when we lose the ranch anyway? When the bank forecloses because we can't make payments? At least this way we walk away with something. I'd rather lose everything than give him the satisfaction of buying us out. They stared at each other across the kitchen, the tension thick enough to cut. I'm not leaving, Ethan said quietly. Whatever happens, I'm staying with you. But we need to be realistic about our situation. Realistic? I've been realistic for 3 years. Realistic doesn't save ranches. Fighting does. Not always. Clara's face crumpled. So you think we should quit? After everything? I think we should consider our options. All of them. The answer is no. I won't sell to Hale. Not now. Not ever. She walked out of the house before Ethan could respond. He sat alone at the table, staring at the numbers, wondering how much fight was left in either of them. The answer came 3 days later in the most unexpected way. Ethan was in town picking up supplies when he overheard two ranchers talking outside the general store. Heard the railroad's coming through after all. Route's been confirmed. Cuts right through the valley. Gonna change everything. Property values'll skyrocket. Ethan's mind started racing. He went straight to the county office and requested the railroad survey maps. Spent 2 hours studying them, tracing the proposed route through the valley. The railroad was coming, and the route ran directly through a corner of Clara's property, which meant the railroad company would have to buy the land, or at least pay for the right-of-way, and that could mean enough money to survive the drought and pay off their debts. He rode back to Clara's ranch faster than was probably safe and found her in the barn. "I found something," he said breathlessly. He explained about the railroad, showed her the survey maps he'd borrowed from the county office. Clara studied them carefully, her expression unreadable. "When's the railroad coming through?" "Construction starts next spring, but they're buying up land now, securing rights of way." "And you think they'll pay enough to make a difference?" "I think they'll pay fair market value for the land they need, plus extra for the disruption. That's how railroads work." Clara traced the route on the map with one finger. "This section here, that's my best grazing land." "I know, but Clara, this could save us. This could be the answer we've been looking for. Or it could be nothing. Railroad companies have been promising to come through Montana for years. Half of them never materialize. This one's different. The route's been approved, the funding's secured. It's happening." Clara looked at him, hope and doubt warring in her expression. "What if you're wrong? Then we're no worse off than we are now. And what if you're right? What if the railroad comes and buys my best land and turns my ranch into a construction zone? Then we use the money to expand somewhere else, buy more land, build something bigger." Clara set down the map and walked to the barn door, staring out at the dry brown valley. "I've spent 3 years fighting to keep this place exactly as it is," she said quietly. "Now you're asking me to change everything." Ethan came to stand beside her. "I'm asking you to adapt, to survive, to build something new instead of clinging to something that might not last. You sound like Hale." "No, Hale wants to crush you. I want to save us." He took her hand. "Change is coming whether we want it or not. The railroad's coming, the drought's not ending, the frontier's changing. We can either change with it or get left behind." Clara was quiet for a long time. "All right," she said finally. "We contact the railroad company, see what they're offering. But Ethan, if this falls through, it won't. You can't promise that." "No, but I can promise I'll be here either way. Success or failure, we face it together." Clara leaned her head against his shoulder. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Me too. But not of losing the ranch, of losing you, of trusting this and having it fall apart. It won't fall apart." "How do you know?" "Because we won't let it. We've survived everything else. We'll survive this too." The railroad company sent a representative 2 weeks later. His name was Charles Morrison, and he was all business, sharp suit, sharper eyes, carrying legal documents and survey equipment. He walked the property with Ethan and Clara, measuring and taking notes, asked questions about water rights and access roads and how much disruption they could tolerate. Finally, he made an offer. $8,000 for the land they needed, plus an additional $2,000 for inconvenience and guaranteed access to the rail line once it was built, $10,000. Enough to pay off their debts, survive the drought, and still have capital left over. Clara looked at the contract Morrison laid out, her hands shaking slightly. "Can we have time to think about it?" she asked. "Take a week, but the offer expires after that. We have other properties to secure." After Morrison left, Clara and Ethan sat on the porch watching the sun set. $10,000, Clara said. "That would solve everything." "It would, but I'd be giving up land my husband died working, land I've fought 3 years to keep." "You wouldn't be giving it up. You'd be trading it for something better." "Would I? Or would I just be giving in, letting circumstances dictate my choices instead of fighting for what I want?" Ethan thought about that. about the difference between fighting and adapting, between stubbornness and strength. I think, he said slowly, that strength isn't about never bending. It's about knowing when to bend so you don't break. You fought for 3 years. Nobody can say you didn't fight hard enough. But maybe now it's time to fight smart instead of hard. Clara leaned against him. When did you get so wise? I've been learning from someone who spent 3 years teaching the whole valley what real strength looks like. They sat there as the light faded, two people who'd survived everything the frontier could throw at them, facing one more impossible choice. Finally, Clara spoke. I want to do it. Take the railroad's offer, but I need you to tell me it's the right choice. I can't tell you that. Only you know what's right for you. That's not helpful. No, but it's honest. Ethan turned to face her. What I can tell you is this. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. We take the offer and build something new. I'm there. We turn it down and fight through the drought. I'm still there. You're not making this choice alone anymore. Tears spilled down Clara's cheeks. I'm tired of being strong all the time, she whispered. I'm tired of fighting alone. I'm tired of pretending I don't need help. Then stop pretending. Let someone help carry the weight for once. Clara buried her face against his chest and cried. Not the angry tears of frustration she'd cried before, but tears of relief, of finally letting go of the burden she'd carried alone for so long. Ethan held her and thought about second chances, about how sometimes loving someone meant not saving them, but standing beside them while they saved themselves. They accepted the railroad's offer the next day, signed the papers, deposited the check, paid off their debts with money left over to invest in improvements and expansion. The town buzzed with gossip about it for weeks. Some said Clara had sold out. Others said she'd made a smart business decision. A few whispered that Ethan had pressured her into it. Clara ignored them all. She was done living her life according to other people's expectations. With the financial pressure lifted, she and Ethan spent the summer expanding their operation. They bought better breeding stock, improved their equipment, hired 2 hands to help with the work, and slowly, the ranch transformed from a struggling operation into something that could genuinely thrive. Victor Hale watched it all with barely concealed fury. He'd expected them to fail, expected the drought to crush them the way it was crushing other small ranchers, expected to eventually buy their land at foreclosure prices. Instead, they were thriving. It ate at him. One afternoon in late August, Hale rode up to their property unannounced. Ethan and Clara met him in the yard, united front. Come to gloat? Hale asked bitterly. About what? Clara replied. About getting lucky with the railroad. About surviving when you should have failed. Luck had nothing to do with it. We worked hard, made smart choices, and didn't give up. You got bailed out. Don't pretend it was skill. We adapted. Something you clearly don't know how to do. Clara crossed her arms. Was there something you wanted, Victor, or did you just come to complain? Hale's jaw worked like he was chewing on something bitter. I came to make you an offer. One last time. We're not selling. You haven't heard the terms. Don't need to. The answer's still no. I'll pay double what the railroad gave you. $20,000, cash, today. The offer hung in the air. It was a fortune, more money than Clara had ever seen in her life. She didn't even hesitate. No, Hale blinked. You're refusing $20,000? I'm refusing you. There's a difference. Clara stepped forward. You want to know why? Because this ranch isn't just land or money. It's proof that I can build something lasting, that I don't need your approval or your money or your permission to exist, and I wouldn't give you the satisfaction of owning it for any amount of money. You're a fool. Maybe, but I'm a fool who's still standing, while you're the man who can't stand seeing a woman succeed where you thought she'd fail. Hale's face turned red. You think you've won? This isn't over. Yes, it is. You lost, Victor, not because we beat you, because you beat yourself. You were so focused on crushing us that you forgot we didn't need to destroy you to succeed. We just needed to survive, and we did. Hale stared at her with something like grudging respect. You really have changed, he said quietly. No, I've always been this person. You just never bothered to look past your assumptions. Hale mounted his horse without another word and rode away. They never saw him make another move against them. Autumn came with golden light and crisp air that smelled like wood smoke and changing leaves. The drought finally broke with a week of steady rain that soaked into the parched earth like a blessing. Grass started growing again, streams filled, the valley turned green. Ethan and Clara stood together watching the rain fall, grateful for the reprieve. "We made it," Clara said softly. "Yeah, we did. All the way through, together." Ethan pulled her close. "Told you we would." "You did. I didn't believe you." "I know." Clara turned to face him, rain dripping down her face. "Love you," she said. "Probably shouldn't. It probably makes things complicated, but I'm done pretending I don't." "Good. Because I love you too. Have since I was 17 and too stupid to know what to do about it. And now? Now I'm still stupid, but at least I'm not running anymore." Clara laughed and kissed him, sweet and fierce and full of promise. When they broke apart, Ethan said, "Marry me." Clara went still. "What?" "Marry me. Make this official. Build a life together instead of just a business." "Ethan, I know it's fast. I know we've got history, but I also know I don't want to spend another day pretending this is just a partnership when it's so much more than that." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "That's the worst proposal I've ever heard." "Probably, but it's honest." "Yes. Yes, it's the worst proposal, or yes, you'll marry me." "Both." Clara smiled through her tears. "Yes, I'll marry you, you idiot, but we're doing this as equals, full partners in everything." Wouldn't have it any other way. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at Clara's ranch. Half the town showed up, some to celebrate, some to gossip, all of them witnessing two stubborn souls finally getting it right. The ceremony was short. The vows were simple. Clara wore a blue dress that fit her perfectly and didn't apologize for a single curve. Ethan wore his best suit and couldn't stop smiling. When the minister pronounced them married, the crowd erupted in applause. And when Ethan kissed his wife, he thought about how far they'd come from two scared kids who thought love was enough. Now they knew better. Love wasn't enough by itself. It took work, trust, the willingness to fight for each other instead of with each other, the courage to be vulnerable, the strength to adapt. But with all that, love could move mountains. Winter came again, as it always did in Montana. But this time Ethan and Clara faced it together, equal partners in a ranch that was finally thriving. They expanded operations, hired more hands, built new structures, made improvements they'd been putting off for years. And one evening in late February, Clara told Ethan she was pregnant. The news hit him like a lightning bolt. "You're sure?" he asked. "The doctor confirmed it yesterday." Ethan sat down hard, his mind reeling. A baby. They were going to have a baby. "Are you okay?" Clara asked nervously. "I'm terrified." "Me too." "What if I'm a terrible father? What if I mess this up the way I've messed up everything else?" Clara took his hands. "You won't, because you're not doing this alone. We're in this together, remember?" "Together," Ethan repeated. "Equal partners in everything, including this." Ethan pulled her close and held her tight, feeling the weight and wonder of what they were about to become. Their daughter was born in October on a morning that smelled like autumn and new beginnings. They named her Grace, after Clara's mother and the second chance they'd both been given. Holding his daughter for the first time, Ethan understood something his father never had, that strength wasn't about control or dominance or bending the world to your will. It was about showing up, being present, loving fully even when it was terrifying. Clara sat beside him in the bed, exhausted and beautiful and stronger than anyone he'd ever known. "We did it," she said softly. "You did it. I just held your hand." "That's all I needed." Ethan looked at his wife and daughter and the life they'd built together against impossible odds. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For giving me a second chance. For trusting me when I didn't deserve it. For being stubborn enough to fight for this even when it seemed hopeless." Clara smiled. "We fought for it together. That's what made the difference." Years passed. Grace grew up strong and fearless, raised by parents who taught her that being different was a strength, not a weakness. That love required work. That fighting for what mattered was always worth it. The ranch prospered, became known throughout Montana as one of the best operations in the territory. People came from miles around to buy stock or learn from Ethan and Clara's methods. Victor Hale eventually sold his auction house and moved to California. Rumor was he'd lost everything in bad investments and couldn't stand watching people he'd tried to crush succeed where he'd failed. Nobody in Pine Ridge mourned his departure. And every evening, as the sun set over the valley they'd fought so hard to keep, Ethan and Clara stood together on their porch and watched the land they'd built turn gold in the fading light. "Do you ever regret it?" Clara asked one evening. "Coming back? Taking this risk?" "Never." "You?" "Never." She leaned against him. "I spent so many years trying to prove I didn't need anyone, that I could do it all alone. And now? Now I know that needing someone doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. And choosing to build something with someone else? That's not giving up your independence. It's choosing something better than independence." Ethan kissed the top of her head. "When did you get so wise?" "Learned from my husband. He's pretty smart when he's not being an idiot." They stood there as night fell, two people who'd survived everything the frontier could throw at them. And in the end, what saved them wasn't money or luck or even love alone. It was the choice to keep showing up for each other, day after day, through drought and debt and doubt. The choice to fight not against each other, but beside each other. The choice to build something together that was stronger than either of them alone. That was the real victory. Not surviving, not even thriving, but learning that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was trust someone else to help carry the weight. And that sometimes, if you were very lucky and very stubborn and willing to do the work, love and partnership and second chances could transform not just a ranch, but two broken people into something whole. The frontier demanded strength. But Ethan and Clara proved that true strength wasn't about standing alone. It was about standing together. And that made all the difference.